Bidii and Navajo is your stomach. So you have a protruding stomach, you have a big stomach. What that talks about is it's kind of a joke. When you see that person going up from seconds or thirds of the cookout, like, oh gosh, you're all Bidii, you just love food. And so it turned from that joke into like more of a wealth mindset, an abundance mindset. And so, back then, during times that we didn't have grocery stores, but you saw that person that was Bidii in the community. That was somebody that knew how to farm. That was somebody that knew how to hunt. That's somebody that took care of themselves. So that's somebody that's worthy of becoming an in-law, or somebody that's worthy of, providing for our family. And that was somebody that was healthy.
That's Navajo farmer and entrepreneur Zach Ben talking about his company Bidii Baby Foods. He's our guest on today's show. You're listening to Down to Earth, the Planet to Plate podcast, a co-production of Radio Cafe and Quivira Coalition. I'm your host, Mary Charlotte Domandi. We will be back with Zach right after these quick announcements. Quivira Coalition has some great workshops coming up this fall in New Mexico, Colorado, and online. Be sure to check out the events page for more information, quiviracoalition.org/events, and Quivira is Quivira. This year's Regenerate Conference schedule is shaping up to be full and insightful. From November 5th through 7th in Santa Fe, New Mexico, we will be bringing together many great speakers, roundtables, and workshops on strategic business planning, do-it-yourself soil health evaluation, bonding and training livestock guardian dogs, and so much more. Registration is open, so reserve your seat now at regenerateconference.com. And before we start our show, I want to thank our new Patreon members, Laura Lynch, Raman Frey, Lucy Moore, and Emily Budesa. Thank you all so much for being part of Down to Earth. If you, dear listeners, want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/down-to-earth-planet-to-plate, and Patreon is spelled Patreon. And for as little as $3 a month, you can help this show to keep going. And really, every little donation or big donation makes a big difference. And it's also, I have to say, it's a gesture of support that tells me that what you're hearing is valuable to you. Podcasting is kind of a funny medium. Like, you don't always get to hear from your listeners. So it actually really means a lot to me to know that you're supporting the show. And I'd also like to just hear from you. You can write to me at mc@radiocafe.org. And you can also sign up for the newsletter. I put one out every couple of weeks, and that tells you all about the podcast. To sign up for that, you can go to downtoearthradio.com and hit the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. I promise you will not get spammed. Thank you so much. And now, without further ado, let's go to our show with Zach Ben. I'm very happy to welcome Zachariah Ben. He's a sixth-generation farmer and sand painter from Shiprock, New Mexico, and he's co-founder and owner of Bidii Baby Foods, which is an agricultural cooperative on the Navajo Nation. He's going to be speaking at the Regenerate Conference. Welcome to Down to Earth.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me, Mary Charlotte.
It's great to have you on the show. I'm very interested to hear how you got into the whole world of baby food, organic indigenous baby food. But before that, I thought we could talk about traditional Navajo farming, because that's something that you know a lot about. And I imagine that you're doing maybe a hybrid of modern organic farming and traditional farming. Tell us about what you're doing.
Yes, thank you so much. So we at Bidii Baby Foods, we are an organic, value-added, traditional baby food making company. The foundation of a lot of this is the Diné philosophy and agricultural methods. So we implement a lot of that into understanding our relationship with the land, really understanding our relationship with our children, and most importantly, our environment that we create for them. And I think that's something that a lot of people tend to forget about when we think of food. When we think of food, we always seem to just, in a way, head in the direction of how much can we profit, how much can we yield. And I think for me and my wife, when we first started this company, it was about understanding and navigating trauma, healing from that, and most importantly, creating an environment for our children to thrive in.
What are the features of traditional Navajo farming? I mean, you go back centuries, if not millennia, here in what is now New Mexico.
Yes, so for us, a lot of our methods here is row crop, where we corrugate our fields and then we fill that up in with water through our furrow systems that we have. And so the traditional techniques that are incorporated are the alignment of the constellations. So we go by the Pleiades and the Orion's Belt constellations. Pleiades is for our Dilyahe, it's our planters, our children. It's a sign that says, it's time to start planting. But before that, the constellation of Orion's Belt, the Athsa, Hastin Athsa, he's the slow one. And so he's a warrior. And so he, is a time for planning, a time of preparation. And then that's when our planters come in. So, of course, with anything before we accomplish our goal, we have to plan, we have to strategize and make those strategic movements. And that's something that is alignment with our farming process. From there, we'll sing our farm songs, our Bidii Way songs, our earth songs, and again, in preparation and during our planting and season. And I think from there, a lot of those cultural values that are instilled also are founded in a lot of things that we do. One of those, I guess, pivotal parts of that is our birth. So in our birth story for my wife and I, we had our firstborn in a Hogan traditional birth, and that's where you bring in soil to catch the amniotic fluid, to catch the blood and the placenta. And so when it catches all of that and you bring it back and you put that back in the farm soil, the reason being is that placenta, that womb is Mother Earth. That womb creates life. And that is something that we give reverence to when we're able to offer that back and saying thank you for the life that we have been now created as, partners in life. From there to our second born, our daughter, she was born here on the farm. So, we didn't have to go and collect the soil and take it to another place, capture it, and then lay it back for us. It was like all in one. And from there, while we're practicing these home births, we're able to instill those cultural values and make that a part of it. And again, that's just all a part of many things that we do here. From there to every 2 or so often years, we'll collect our seeds and then we'll, in a way, trade all of that with another farmer in our region. And we just keep circulating our seeds. So that way, if you keep working with one lineage of a seed, your genetics will go down. So we want to keep our genetics up. We want to keep fresh corn circulating and the fresh stalks circulating. And so in order to accomplish that, you have to then pivot them out, in and out. So that's where those trade routes and trade stories come in from the past there and how our ancestors were able to accomplish that. And we ourselves as human beings, we're seeds. We're seeds as well. And, those are some of the things that were traded. Those are the new blood that circulates in and creates new clans and keeps our old clans moving along with fresh blood. And same understanding that you would have when you're, clipping certain buds off of a tomato plant because you want this certain genetic or you want to crossbreed and that's that natural organic form of GMO. So our ancestors have accomplished that. And that's something that, maize in general is a derivative of that. And that's something that, that's genesis is blades of grass. And we just, crossbred and crossbred and crossbred. And then pretty soon you have, different forms of corn. You have different growths of corn for different regions. And then as it becomes assimilated to its region, it becomes a part of it naturally. And that's kind of just we as human beings, we migrate around the globe. We migrate around Mother Earth. And that's something that we forget now because we have boundaries in place. We have borders in place. And so this is something that our seeds have crossed. And those are some of the things that we're stewarding as human beings today. And that's something that is a part of, some of our practices here and our understanding here at Bidii Baby Foods.
It's fascinating listening to you because, we talk about, holistic land management, but this is holistic on a whole even bigger concept. I mean, you're talking about the stars, probably the moon, connecting the body of your literal body with the soil through the placenta. You're talking about seeds. You're talking about the metaphor of human as seeds. It's a really big picture, all of which affects the food.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the old saying, you are what you eat. And so that can go from the nutritional parts of your soil, how much nutrition that you have in your soil. If you don't have nutrition in your soil, you don't have a good crop. And when you don't have good crop, you don't have good food. And those are the things that, just again, having that relationship very on early. And once you establish that relationship, and this is where, again, those cultural components come into place. It's just you then begin to live it, you practice it. And that's the magic that happens. So within that magic of understanding life, then you ritualize it. And that is something that, those pillars of our culture is built upon that, the farm. And that's something that, for us here is, and what makes us different here at Bidii is we ritualize those processes to make this traditional baby food accessible.
Now, is corn the basis of the food that you were making and selling?
Yes, yes. The corn in general is called Diné Binadafgai. So Navajo Indian white corn. And so that's the base of our corn. From there, you could just dehydrate it, wait to seed, dehydrate it, and then from there you're able to, process it into like a hominy stew, cornmeal, and make, byproducts of that. Or you can go from there to making the value added where we'll steam that underground. And then after we steam that, dehydrate that, mill it down, you have your baby food slash coffee creamer, and then you can keep working with it there. Or you can keep it whole kernel and again, make it like a hominy stew, but with more flavor and more nutrition instilled into it after its value added process from steaming it underground.
What did traditional Navajo people feed their babies before the whole baby food industry? Like, what were your great 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 grandparents feeding their kids once they were, weaned or whatever?
Yeah, I think a number of things that we have lost practice of. And so for us, when we're able to bring about these culturally rich foods, we're able to reestablish that connection to our ancestors as well and their practices. And then so with that, you have your nixtamalization of corn, your blue corn. You have your nixtamalization of white corn. And so we see it that when we steam it underground, that's our nixtamalization process. We're able to bring about that nutrition, but also that practice. And that's something that we know that as long as we're in operation, we will not commercialize because that is something you cannot copy. And so that's something because there's these recipes from our ancestors have been passed down for generations from making like a sumac porridge to the variety of soups that we have to being able to create the corn-based products that we do have. One of them that are pretty unique too, they call it warrior bread, is where you'll take your cornmeal and you mix it with a different thing. So it's basically, if you look at it from a further away lens, is that it becomes like a granola bar that's based out of corn, and then you would bury that into like an ash pit. So during times of conflict, during times of travel, you need something that's dehydrated that will get you to long lengths on your travel or journey that you're taking or conflict that you're overcoming. You would build a fire that's smoldering rather than, emitting a ton of smoke because you don't want to give up your position. So you're building a nice little smoldering fire here, get it hot enough, and you make your corn-based granola bar or bread. So they say bread. Then you bury that in the charcoal or the ash that's or the sand that's nice and hot and it'll dehydrate, get nice and hard. And then so from there, you'll take that and you'll run with it. And you just, take little portions of that and then just eat it along your journey. So that's another grand example of that. To one story of recent history is my great great grandmother on my dad's side. So that would have been his great grandmother. She, during this period too, is a period of like, living off the land, relying on sheep herding, and there was no infrastructure around for like care homes and stuff. And so my father always told me, take care of your elders, take care of your sa. Sa is old age. Sa is something you aspire to live towards. And so with that, he said, take care of your son. I never really got what that meant until, he told me the story of his great grandmother. And so he lived with his grandmother and was raised by her. And so they were out there in sheep camp in the Hogan. And so his great grandmother was very ill, just very frail as well. And so she would, not get around. She needed support. And so basically, it's a toddler, it's a newborn that you're taking care of at this point. You're changing their diaper, you're changing their clothes, you're giving them baths, you're feeding them. And so, we forget about that in today's society. What do we do with our old people? Our elders, we just ship them off to care homes or residences that are, not a part of our societal community because, we're too busy with our everyday lives to then take care of our own elders. And so that was a lesson there. And so with that, as he was taking care of her in the Hogan, middle of nowhere, no running water, no electricity, he would have to haul everything in. And so he would make this stew with his grandmother, and that's how he fed his great grandmother. Was what he would do is he would take a cotton cloth, he'd dip it in the broth, and then he would feed that to her, and that she would suckle on that cotton. And so that's how she got her nutrition, was through the broth of the stew that they would make. And same thing for the porridge that they would make out of the corn mills, or all of that good stuff. And he would dip that in that cotton thing, and then she would suckle on that. And that's how she was able to get her nutrition, sort of like a baby as well. So today, of course, we have our porridge or pureed foods that we do have today. So those are the things that we're able to continue to incorporate and have a part of our children's lives. And those are the stories that inspire us to create a company around the ability to gain access to these traditional foods with those values instilled into them.
Are the people who are buying and eating the Bidii Baby food that you produce, is that mostly other Navajo people, Dene people?
Majority, yes. The majority of the demographics, yes. It's our own people. And the reason being for that is, of course, recipe developments, being able to, or recipe education. And so with that, we are rolling out a new packaging that gives us quick links, gives our consumers quick links to a website that has recipes there readily available with the ability to add ingredients from the store or grocery store chains. And so while using the Nishiji Butlatni, the Navajo dry corn cereal that is our main product, as a base for that recipe. And so that's how we're educating our consumers. So that way we're able to get everybody on board to access this traditional foods.
You said a moment ago that you are resisting commercialization and, living in this culture of, United States capitalism, which is so much about entrepreneurship and every kind of commercialization and monetization. I mean, they'll monetize the air you breathe if they could. What does that resistance look like and feel like to you, as you're trying to make a living?
Yes, I think for us, I think a lot of the barriers around the culture foods are centered around the resistance to adapt and modernize those recipes. And that's something that, for us, I guess going to the base of the question is that, for us, we're not about capitalizing off our own people, but there is a but there because everybody needs to eat. And so do we as farmers, as producers. And so today we are in a modern society that, the currency is all the same, the currency that we work with. And so with the disenfranchisement of indigenous cultures, economies, and currencies that we once had with first contact, that is what we're catching up from, I feel and see. And so if you come to the Navajo Nation, you'll see that it's just an impoverished community. About 48%, are unemployed here on the Navajo Nation. you have about 30% of our own people living on an annual $20,000 income. And so, just the impoverishing is abundant, and that is what we want to be able to change. And so when we started Bidii Baby Foods, it wasn't about creating this pyramid where we sit on the top of that pyramid as capitalists do, and everybody else invests into you. For us, it was about horizontal investment. It was about gaining the revenue, getting those resources so we can make horizontal investment. In order to accomplish this, and for any small business, those 1 to 5 years are, you're either breaking even or you're in the negative. And so with that, we understood that, and we didn't want to take any loans. We didn't want to accrue more debt. And so in order to accomplish this, we started, and a lot of our work is community based. And so in order to, offset a lot of those costs, we started a nonprofit a year later after establishing Bidii Baby Foods. So Bidii is an LLC domestically incorporated on the Navajo Nation through the Department of Economic Development. And our 501c3 called the Ben Initiative is our nonprofit that is established with and registered through the state of New Mexico. So with this combination of these two businesses, we're able to make that horizontal investment back into our communities. One of those highlights of those investments is our Farmer in Residence program, where we're able to build up young farmers with the technical assistance to both the traditional farming methods and practices, to grant writing, administrative tasks, and business plan development. So from there, we're able to combine those efforts into building up our young generation for 30 years old and under farmers, gain them access to land through subleases, help with water issues, helping to build out irrigation projects and such, and or at least strategizing or guiding in that way. And from there, they get that full understanding of what it takes to farm on the reservation. Once they have the understanding and they have a brand to work with that they've invested into, from there we can aggregate from them, or they can create their own agricultural opportunity through the entrepreneurship.
One of the things that you're doing and that you're going to be talking about at the Regenerate conference is developing a business in tribal trust land. Talk about, first of all, what is tribal trust land and what are some of the issues that you're working with in regard to that?
Yes. So with that, a lot of the issues that we have seen is the legal and regulatory issues of tribal trust lands. So tribal trust land is during the conflict between America or the United States Army and America in general against the Navajo Nation. We had about 20 or so war chiefs during that time. So they said, the conflict has been going on for a while and we need it to end. What will that take? And so our leaders fought and advocated for access to natural resources, of course, water being one of them, fertile soil being one of those two as well. And so in order to live an agrarian lifestyle, we need access to water, was what one of our leaders said. Chief Manuelito said that. And so with that, what can we do to, work something out? And then this was right when the American Civil War was starting back east. So they needed the conflict here in the Southwest to end. So that's, in a way, what was strategic, but also an advantage to us gaining more tribal trust land here on the Navajo Nation, being that we are one of the largest reservations in the United States with about 3 million or so acres. And so with that, and access to the San Juan River and water rights on top of that. So this tribal trust land is a trust that was signed into a treaty that was given to us by the federal government. So now the oversight for this federal trust land is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so they oversee the Navajo Nation government. Navajo Nation being that it is a sovereign nation and it has its own president, vice president, council, delegates, which are basically our senators from different regions of the Navajo Nation. So, they each represent a different community that it has its own boundary, which and translation can be a county or a state, as it would in parallel with the construct of the United States. And you have these individuals that get together, talk about certain issues from their communities or what we can do to create these solutions. And the president would sign off on that. And so we do have our legislative sessions, which are called council sessions. But, you know, fast forward to now, there's a lot of issues with bureaucracy getting in the way. There's a ton of red tape. There is unclear or overlapping tax jurisdictions and boundaries that come into effect of like, okay, we have a USDA rep on the Arizona side because that's where the capital of the Navajo Nation is, but we don't have a rep from the New Mexico side for USDA. Why is that? If we had an issue here, we would have to go to Window Rock, but Window Rock would then send us back to our local leaders, which we would talk to the local leaders, and it's just a lot of finger pointing and
Oh
saying,
God, oh God.
talk to so and so, talk to so and so. They know this, they know that, and it just becomes a year of trying to navigate that. So with that, there's a lack of consistent oversight or regulation for these policies and procedures that are currently in place. And so with that, a lot of federal approval we also have to wait for on top of the tribal navigation. So that's often slow and also bureaucratic. So this can deter outside investment. So when you immediately drive from a border town that is bordering the reservation, you can see the abundance of resources, infrastructure, and connectivity. But when you drive from there into the reservation, it's just immediately, where's all the businesses? Where's all the people? Where's opportunity? It's very depressing. And so, for me, growing up in that environment, I got tired of that. And that's something that I wanted to change. I wanted my children to inherit generational wealth that I can build with my wife. That was creating a healthy environment, a thriving environment for my children. So what does that look like? And so, fast forward to today, and this is the reasons why we started what we started at Bidii, is to gain access to healthy traditional foods, increase that access. Even then, there's such a high demand. So here's the reality of that, is that we cannot guarantee production on tribal trust land no longer with the fourth year of operation here on the tribal trust land. So again, we have to pivot. We have to strategize. We have to pull back and become this warrior, the slow warrior that thinks about what those next movements are going to be. Is it going to be investing into private land off the reservation so we're not hitting all this red tape, we're not hitting all this bureaucracy and nepotism that comes into our path? And with that, the infrastructure, water, irrigation water here is inconsistent. Yes, we have access to water rights, but even then there's no funding that trickles down from the Navajo Nation or federal government that comes in to revamp our irrigation systems here. This season alone, we had to give up, all of our production side of corn. So we literally, as I speak to you right now, we don't have any product to package that we'll be harvesting. A lot of the product that we'll have to be going through is aggregating from our local producers, and especially our farmland residents who have successful crops they're growing. And that's kind of just when we took a step back and became the slow warrior, we thought to ourselves, like, oh, wow, we're really good teachers. We turned from really good producers into really good teachers. And a good teacher is seeing that your students are learning and thriving with the information that you're giving them. And that was something that we saw. Our farmland residents, they're thriving. Their fields are abundant, they're green, they're well taken care of. And it's like, wow, okay, I think that's where the direction that we need to move into more. And so that is a great summary of a best way that I can put it of how we've navigated that historically, currently, and some of the solutions that we're trying to bring to the table in order to push our Navajo leaders into better solutions for our children to gain and to run with. And right now, we don't have that opportunity as we speak.
Is the red tape, is the bureaucratic piece the biggest barrier?
It really is. It really is. We realize that we can pull in funding with our nonprofit arm. We can pull in funding. We can fiscally sponsor some of these chapters organizations, basically these cities halls for these, pull in federal funds to help, so that way we don't have to go through the Navajo Nation in its slow process. But just the local leaders themselves they just don't understand what that looks like. They can't grasp that reality because they lived in hardship all of their lives that they think this is normal. And it's unfortunate. And those are the things that we want to change. And those are things that we want to be able to bring about these solutions, but we can't accomplish that right now. And that's something that we have to sit with. And that is something that we have to strategically build up our young farmers to use as much of the land rights and water rights that we currently do have before we lose more of it and continue that on for us. So that way, and maybe in 10 years, we can then head in that direction where there's not as much red tape and bureaucracy, because then we would have policies in place that will protect us and protect our farmers.
The company is called Bidii Baby Foods, and Bidii is spelled Bidii. What does that word mean?
So Bidii in Navajo is is your stomach. So you have a protruding stomach, you have a big stomach. What that talks about, well, it's kind of a joke. So, when you see that person going up from seconds or thirds of the cookout, they're like, oh gosh, you're all bitty, you just love food. And so it turned from that joke into like more of a wealth mindset, an abundance mindset, I should say. And so, back then, during times that we didn't have grocery stores, but you saw that person that was bitty in the community. That was somebody that knew how to farm. That was somebody that knew how to hunt. That's somebody that took care of themselves. So that's somebody that's worthy of becoming an in-law, or somebody that's worthy of, providing for our family. And that was somebody that was healthy, because they had a nice big bit and they were bitty. And so that's something, for us is like, that's what we want to bring back is we want to make sure all of our people are fed. So people that interact with Bidii Baby Foods, they're fed. And so with that, food should not be political. Food should not be restrained. Food should actually be increased so that way it can reach more of our people in general as a society.
It's you and I were talking the other day when you were talking about the meaning of Bidii. I just kept thinking about, the skinniness culture that pervades, especially for women, that pervades the kind of aesthetic of the United States, at least popular culture. And this is really the opposite of that. And it feels like a much more nourishing thing, and really almost like thinking about your health from the inside.
That is correct. That is correct. And so for us, when I say Bidii, I'm sure when I was first explaining the name in itself, people probably thought like, oh, he's been critical of, fat people, or that, or, looking down on others that are not skinny enough, but no, it's actually a healthy thing. It's healthy to have a nice little stomach. When you have energy to burn, when you're healthy, knowing that you're able to burn off that energy later. So that's why for us, we always see ourselves as a balance of like, you have those long days on the farm. Everybody has a long day somewhere. And so with that, heck, I'm gonna go and get some McDonald's. Like that's just the society that we're in now. And that's something for us is like, we make traditional baby food, it's organic, but we're still gonna enjoy the current amenities that are in place and treat ourselves out in that way. But we won't make it normal. What we want to make normal is our palate. So with that, part of it is that we don't believe in a diet culture that takes away food. We believe in a culture that adds more food to the table. So a grand example of this is here on the Navajo Nation, I think they said it was like only like 14 grocery stores that span all this acreage. It's not enough grocery stores, and there's only one prominent grocery store brand that's here, and that's called Bash's. And we don't have a city market, we don't have Albertsons, Safeway, Walmart, Sam's Club, Costco. We don't have any of that. We just have one grocery store chain that serves all of the Navajo Nation. From there, we then have our little bodegas. We have our gas stations, and those are the ones that also, stock their shelves. They're just a gas station, but they stock their shelves with like Weekend EBT certified food, loaves of bread, spam, because again, it's a lack of that access to food because of the limited amount of grocery stores that we have. So with that access to that food, the food itself that is on the shelves are food that is self-sustaining, that are canned, and dehydrating. So with that, like around like 30% of the people that live on the Navajo Nation, they don't have access to running water and electricity still. So with that, they have to be strategic about what they buy with the amount of budget that they have and the infrastructure that they have. So with that, I have no running water, I have no electricity. I have $100 for the week. That's a living $100. So, all right, I gotta get hay for my, sheep. That's me $20 right there. All right, I got 80 left. All right, I got use 20 for that for groceries. For the groceries, get there. What are you buying now with $20 to get you to feed about 4 people? I'm gonna get Spam because that's cheapest. I'm gonna get bread. I'm gonna get ramen noodles. What else is there? Oatmeal. Oatmeal's a good one. Long grain rice, canned milk, condensed milk, or powdered milk. There's my budget. There you go. That'll get me through the week. Till payday. Till payday. All right. Put $20 into gas and maybe $40 into gas because you probably live an hour and a half away from town to, let's see. All right. Well, that's that. So now you have like $20 for whatever, which is going to be like, McDonald's, because you're in town. So you're gonna just get McDonald's anyways, or, Taco Bell or whatever. Get home. That's your budget. That's just how you live. And that's what that's the 30% that live in that way. So now for us, when we hear about this diet culture, when we hear about, people it just takes time to just hit the gym, go for a run. When you're surviving on so minimal nutrition, you don't have carbs to burn. Yeah. You don't have things that will fatten you. And they say in diet culture, eat a lot of ground beef and, eat lean and then unlean. But you can't even afford that. You can't even afford bison. And even if you could afford it, you couldn't even store it in your freezer or refrigerator because you don't have electricity yet. So, with that, we have this thing called the Navajo Nation junk food tax. So we're taxing our own people junk food tax. And that's all of that I listed out is junk food. Probably not the condensed milk and the rice, but the rest is junk food considered. It's crazy. It's just wild. So we're taxing our own people and taxing our own people to not buy junk food, but that's all we have access to, and that's all that's affordable. For 2 pounds of grapes, it is $14. So would you use that $20 to buy the amount of food that I just listed? Or would you spend $14 on 2 pounds of grapes that you cannot refrigerate and it's not even organic? What are you going to do? What's your budget options? All right, my budget options are going to go this route, but I'm going to have to be penalized for it because my own nation is taxing me. Why are they taxing me? Because that tax is supposed to funnel down into our farmers and ranchers and build up their infrastructure and their resources so we can then make farm to school or farm to grocery stores accessible, farm to table, basically. But that's not even in the policies. What happens now is the reality of it is the tax gets funneled back down, gets reallocated and put into general funding. So it's just spent elsewhere except what it was intended for. Intended, not even written in black and white. We're failing our own people as Navajo Nation leaders and policy advocates that are currently out there. And we're taking away our food from our own people. We're not adding it onto the shelves for our people to thrive with. We're teaching them how to survive more strategically now. And because that's what we're good at. So we at Bidii, we are getting into those grocery food store chains. We want to add that in. We want to make it Wicked EBT certified so it's ready to go. But even then, that is up by the federal government to be put on the chopping block. So, everything else is exacerbated even more since COVID is because we're trying to pivot. We're trying to make it accessible here and there. So, those are some of the things that we experience and see every day. But those are some of the things that we're slowly hoping to change and create that change. If not us, then our young farmers that we're building up right now.
I appreciate how you're taking the long view about the kind of changes that you want to make and want to see. What is your vision? Like, you described this, the poverty, the red tape, the taxes not going to the places where they're intended, the lack of access to resources and even water and so on for farmers. What do you envision? I mean, I know you have a vision of really not just surviving but thriving. What does that look like?
That looks like building up an environment for our children to prosper with. And when I say children, I don't mean just, our two children that we have, but it's the children that are going to be growing up in their place. They're constituents, and our next generation is what we're working towards. Our great grandchildren is who we want to be thriving right now. That's the long game that we're playing. We're playing chess, not checkers. We're not going to see immediate change right now in this generation, but we'll see change 2 generations from now, and we're going to be fixing a lot from here until then. That's the legacy that we're building, and that legacy of healing. For me, entrepreneurship has been healing for both my wife and I. And those are the things that we want to be able to be an example, set that example up for our young farmers to be guided by, see that example, and start initiating their own change through their own branding that they want to create, or nonprofits that they want to create or partner with, and just have this cooperative construct that is able to make this investment back into their communities here. And that is in alignment with our mission. So our mission at Bidii is to reconnect Indigenous families with our longstanding relationship between earth and parenting. We believe that there's a direct connection between nurturing the land and nurturing our children. By understanding how to grow traditional crops and preparing them for young children, we're actively dismantling systems of oppression and rematriating Indigenous foodways. So that's basically in our mission, is being able to provide that opportunity for not only just our own two children, but it was inspired by them, be able to continue that on for our children to eat with and thrive with.
Part of what you're talking about is changing the way you do things. Part of what you're talking about is changing the way you see things. What does that look like for you and for people you're working with?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a healed self is a healed community. And that's where, when we started this journey together, I wanted to heal a lot of the intergenerational historical traumas that were a part of myself that were continuously, at conflict. Voices in the mind, there's, things that would pull me off the journey that I was, set on. Those are the things that, those monsters that I want to put away. And that's where the story of our twin warriors come into play from our creation stories. So our twin warriors are called Nayet Nazgan and Tobajishin. So alien of Slayer gods and born for water. So these two twins, they went out in our stories, they went out in the journey to the sun, their father, who they didn't know that was their father at the time. And they convinced him. Out of that convincing, they had to go through different challenges to prove to the sun that those two boys were his lineage. And so when they proved to the sun that they were his sons, then he gave them tools and weapons to come back to the Nepakea, our Navajo land, and annihilate these monsters, the monsters of anxiety, depression, of these giants and big old creatures that existed here before us and during our creation. So they annihilated all these monsters but four. So out of these four monsters, they taught us how to take care of ourselves. One of them was hunger, how to go out and farm and, provide food and go out and hunt and provide for our families again, to be Bidii, not skinny. If back then you were skinny, you were unhealthy, you were sick, and you needed to eat. From there to the cold, and now we have 4 seasons here. So we're able to grow in those 4 seasons and give reverence in the winter season to be able to retell these stories, practice our ceremonies, and let the land rest. And so lice was another one. Lice is there to teach us hygiene, teach us about how to take care of ourselves. And those are the things that, if you have lice, you're not taking care of yourself, they say, or you're not taking care of your hygiene. You're not living in a place that is healthy for you. And then from there, I believe the next one was poverty. And They taught us how to create healthy opportunity and then make those investments and have that value system. So that way we can create a currency, create an economy that we can teach with. So those are the things that I feel like, we're able to create and have established here. So that way, when we establish that through the farmland, we're teaching that to our young individuals. We're teaching that to ourselves. We're learning with the tools that were given to us to be able to rid the world of not yet, not yet, the aliens, these monsters that bother us today. So today we believe in healthy trauma on the farm. We believe of persevering and pushing through the heat because that builds up endurance, that builds up your heart. It increases your heart rate for a healthy reason. It increases your muscles, increases your stamina, so you can overcome certain things in life where you'll need that physical part of yourself. The business is creating a threshold in our mental capacity, that brain power of having to work with 40 emails a day, of having to keep our budget in place, of having to do our annual reports and stay in touch with everybody, our marketing. It increases that threshold in the brain because we're able to take care of ourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. So basically, in a nutshell, is that, we're using those cultural values and those teachings and those tools that were given to us then, reusing them today so that we can heal with today and heal our future generations with. And those are the things that will brings balance back. And that's what we believe in. And that's what we want our children to see and thrive with here in the future.
You are also a sand painter. Can you tell us what that is and how that fits into the bigger picture of what you're doing?
Yeah, so my sand painting career is on a hiatus right now. You could Google my name, Zachariah Ben, and you can see a lot of my artworks, my exhibitions, and current galleries that I work with here in the Southwest. But sand painting is an ephemeral art that takes place in ceremonies. And it's an art that, we're able to depict these deities, these cultural symbols, and use these visuals and the physical parts of the sand that we go out and we collect from different areas, whether it be in the region or around the globe, that we bring these colors back together to create and depict these deities that we can then heal our patients with. So within that, for me, knowing that our culture, we're slowly losing it. We're losing our medicine men. We're losing these knowledge holders and our ceremonies, our songs, and our language. So how do we retain that? So for me, it was about creating these little cultural repositories through this two-dimensional piece that you'll be able to experience and see the depiction of these deities and some of these symbols and rehear some of those stories. So for me, it was about reinterpreting what I experienced within life and within ceremony back on the board and continue those stories on for my children to look about it in a museum someday and say, yeah, this is my dad's painting, but also this is a story that's a part of it. This is a story, and then the stories will continue on. So that was the journey there of sand painting. Fast forward to today now, when we started Bidii and have two children, two under 5 years old. It's been quite the challenge to just sit down and paint. So with that challenge, I simply see it as a change of mediums. So now I see my canvas is the da'ake, the farm soil. That's my canvas. The seeds is my pigment. It colors that canvas. The shovel is my paintbrush, and I'm able to navigate and nurture that color and bring color back into Mother Earth in that sense. And so, I just see it as my medium changing. I still am the artist that I am. I'm still a sand painter, still work with natural pigments of the earth, but this is my way of creating art that heals, art that you can eat and enjoy. And then, of course, and heal with, because the job of an artist is easy, but the role of an artist is creating social impact. Where in business mindsets, we're not looking for an ROI, return of investment. We're looking at a return of impact. So how are you impacting as a farmer today, your communities?
Zach Ben is a farmer, and he's the co-founder and owner of Bidii Baby Foods, which can be found on the web at bidiibabyfoods.org, and it's Bidii babyfoods.org. If people want to follow your work, are there any other places where they can go?
Yes, we do have a social media outlet on Instagram at Bidii Baby Foods. If you want to come see some visuals of what we experience here on the farm, please give us a follow there. And of course, just Google my name, Zachariah Ben, to connect there and see some of the artwork that I do and some of the stories that have been shared so far. Thank you.
And you will be speaking at the Regenerate Conference in early November, so people can look out for that too. Zach, thank you so much for being with us on Down to Earth.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary Charlotte. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Down to Earth. We would love it if you would support this program, which you can do by going to patreon.com/down-to-earth planet to plate, where you can sign up for as little as $3. Patreon is Patreon. And also please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. The Quivira Coalition is a not-for-profit and a community network of ranchers, farmers, conservationists, scientists, educators, and many others dedicated to regenerative practices that produce healthy food, support meaningful livelihoods, sustain biodiversity, and remedy the impacts of climate change. To learn more about Quivira and how you can support their work, visit quiviracoalition.org, Quivira. And finally, this show is a production with the Radio Cafe. You can check out radiocafe.org to hear back episodes of this show and also find all kinds of other shows on a wide variety of topics as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.